Good morning. I call this meeting to order. If we can have all the members' attention. Welcome to meeting number 19 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. Given the ongoing pandemic situation and in light of the recommendations from the health authorities, as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on Thursday, November 25th, 2021, to remain healthy and safe, all those attending the meeting in person are to maintain 2-meter physical distancing, must wear a non-medical mask when circulating in the room, and it is highly recommended that the mask be worn at all times, including when seated. Must maintain proper hand hygiene by using the provided hand sanitizers in the room. Please refrain from coming to the room if you are symptomatic. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on the mute and your camera must be on. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082, we will continue our study on differential outcomes in immigration, refugees, and Citizenship Canada decisions. I would like to welcome our witnesses. We have today as witnesses the officials from the Department of Citizenship and Immigration. We have today Carolyn Xavier, Associate Deputy Minister, Tara Lang, Director General Central Network, and Farah Boisclair, Director Anti-Racism Task Force. Before we go in, Ms. Kwan is raising her hand. Yes, Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Before we begin, I would like to raise a concern that I have with officials and then ask for their explanation and response regarding the situation. During a meeting held at this committee on February the 15th on processing timelines and acceptance rates, I had made a request to IRCC department officials to table by the end of the month a breakdown of application backlogs of all streams. When I made that request, Mr. Daniel Mills, the Senior Assistant Deputy Minister of Operations, said, and I quote, "I will be happy to provide that information because I have it here on hand." Even though Mr. Mills clearly indicated that he already had the information on hand and I had requested for the information to be tabled by the end of the month, it took 44 more days after the deadline for that information to be tabled, which the committee received on April the 13th. However, nearly a month before IRCC's response to the committee, the website on CIC News published tables that were provided to them from IRCC in response to a media request in March containing the exact same breakdown requested by me at the committee. The data IRCC provided to them was also more current, with updated figures as recent as March 17, 2022, while the information provided to the committee was current to December 31, 2021. As noted in the House of Commons Procedure and Practice Manual, and I quote, the standing order states that the standing committees have the power to order the production of papers and records. Another privilege that is rooted in the Constitution, which is delegated by the House. In carrying out their responsibility to conduct studies and inquiries, standing committees often have to rely on a wide array of papers to aid them in their work, end quote. It is therefore extremely concerning that IRCC is providing timely responses to media requests while withholding document requests that IRCC official explicitly said were already on hand from this committee, which has a legal mandate to study on their affairs and would constitute, in many ways, a breach of privilege, preventing parliamentarians from being able to do their work. I should note that in previous responses from IRCC, it's often clear from the text of IRCC's responses that they were written shortly after the request was made, but then it takes months for it to make it to the committee. I'm interested to know who is blocking that and why is there such a delay. As such, Madam Chair, I would like to ask officials to table a response for why it took so long to provide the information that they said they already had to the committee while providing more up-to-date information on shorter notice in response to media inquiries, and provide a timeline of where the document where the document that was held up. Why was the document held up, and any email records relating to the to responding to that request. And I would like to get a response regarding IRCC delaying documents requested by this committee until the information is out of date. And while providing more up-to-date information and more quickly in response to the media. This is not acceptable, Madam Speaker. So we have officials here coming before us whose job is to answer our questions, to accept undertakings per our motion. But if this is the approach to which they're taking, it is not good enough. And I want to state that very clearly. So I would like to get a clear explanation from officials tabled to the committee as to why this happened. And furthermore, Madam Speaker, I have a list of items to which I am still waiting responses from the officials. I painstakingly put together a binder of all the undertakings that I had requested, and I have a series of them to which I have yet to receive a response. And I can put all this onto the record, or unless if the officials actually have tracked it, to see where the response are. We're supposed to get this information so that we have it in advance of us writing our reports. And in many instances, that deadline's pass and we don't have that information. We're now into another study with respect to differential treatment, and this is all kind of related. And so it is absolutely essential that we get this documentation before we begin that work. Otherwise, we will not have the sufficient information to proceed, and that's a disservice not only to the committee and our members, but it's a disservice to the community who's waiting for answers, Madam Speaker. So I will ask for your direction whether or not I should read out all the items to which I have not yet received onto the record, or will officials actually track that information and be able to provide this to us in a timely fashion?
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. In regards to the request which you have made and the information has not come as yet, the clerk has prepared a table for me, so I will get in touch with the department and follow up and make sure that those requests which are still pending are processed as soon as possible. And your other question, let me just consult the clerk, how we will deal on that, and I will respond to you. Ms. Kwan, if you can read into the record the undertakings which you are waiting, and then we will have the department respond to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. All right, then I'll read into the record the pieces that are still missing. So my question to officials was, is the minister exercising his authority to bring in special procedures secretly? This is in reference to Afghan processing. And I indicated that I'm being very specific. I'm not talking about general immigration measures. There are some specific actions that the ministry is taking that are not made public. People do not know what those specific actions might be, what it would look like, or whom it would apply to. Is that still being done by the ministry right now? And so I would like to get a response. And so that's I would like to get a response then from the minister or from the department with respect to that. So that's a request to which I've made, to which I've not received a response for. The other piece that I've asked for, and it was to Ms. It reads as such. Ms. Campbell-Jarvis told us at committee that there's an IRCC playbook used as a level of oversight for bias in IRCC. Could the officials table this playbook and also provide documentation or information on how it is being used by officials? That is not yet received. And Another document, to what extent has IRCC processed the emails that Afghans were directed to send to the government? In other words, how many of those emails have received a response from IRCC and how many are being processed? By response, I don't mean the automatic response they get. Perhaps I can get the officials to send those numbers in, and if I can get in detail for the committee the numbers of how many applications have been processed, how many of them have been completed, and how many of them are still waiting for completion, I would appreciate it. Not yet received. What about the applications for people who are not interpreters or collaborators, which is to say those who may have family members who are here in Canada and who have connections that way? If any of those are being processed at all, how many? If you can give those specific numbers, not half, which was the response that I got, but exact numbers and under which category, that would be appreciated. Perhaps that could be submitted to the committee then, not yet received. Could the officials provide a breakdown of that representation right now so that we have a baseline on which to evaluate the outcome of this work? Can we get the baseline number so that we can evaluate the progress? Further to that, will the interim progress reports be put on the public record, and that's, I have not received a response. If you're wondering, Madam Chair, in terms of that representation, what I'm referring to, it is referring to equitable representation amongst staff at IRCC, both agents and among medium and upper management positions. One of the key issues is to actually have a baseline of evaluation so that we know where things are at, and if there's going to be improvement or changes down the road, we need to be able to see it. I have not received that data, or the committee has not. The other information I've asked for is if you can table for the committee then the timelines of when that further study will be done and the mandate for those studies, I would appreciate it. And that is in reference to independent studies. Ms. Carolyn Xavier had explained to committee that further independent studies are being planned on this strategy. And so I would like to know the timeline with respect to that, and I have not yet received a response to those questions. The other issue, I have asked officials to provide the pathways to the committee, and these pathways are in reference to the Ukrainians who are, sorry, I just have to, this is in reference to a question around Afghans and other racialized minorities that are in Ukraine. As it stands right now, as far as we can tell, the immigration measures do not apply to them. The special Ukraine immigration measures do not apply to them. And so I was asking this question, and Ms. Carolyn Xavier had responded that the options and pathways exist for them to be able to indicate that and would be able to assist them. So I was asking what pathways and for the officials to table that, and I have not yet received that information. And those are all the undertakings that oh, sorry, and there's one more. One last piece that that is missing, and that is asking for the work being done by the department to coordinate and facilitate the generosities of Canadians who wish to help Ukrainians arrive in Canada. And I was asking for information with respect to that, and we have not yet received it. So those are all the undertakings that are still yet to be provided to committee.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. Would the officials, is it possible officials can respond to the issues or in the concerns which Ms. Kwan has raised? Ms. Xavier, would you like to say something to it?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. So really take note of the undertakings and the comment made by the member of the committee with regards to the outstanding undertakings. I can assure you that there is no way that we are trying to be preventative in doing this. And so we will ensure that the undertakings are responded in a more effective and quick manner. I also invite that I have many of those answers if the member would like that I could proceed to answer throughout the session today as well, which could be another way in which to get some of those responses sooner rather than later if that's helpful.
Thank you. I'm just going to respond to that. These undertakings were asked for prior to this committee, and that should have been provided to this committee, especially just now we heard from the officials to say that they have the information to which they can provide to us as we engage in this meeting. I have 6 minutes, Madam Chair, to ask questions of officials, and time runs just like that. And then if I'm lucky, I might get another round. And it's just simply not acceptable. Here we are, yet another example for officials on the record to say they have the information, but somehow, I don't know why, that they have not prevented this. I think with this kind of practice, we are heading right directly into a question of privilege being breached. I hope that is not the case. I hope that I can get fulsome answers and acceptable answers from the officials, and I hope that this practice will not continue. And more to the point, how is it possible that committee members can ask for information to which staff says they have readily on hand, not provided to us with after 44 days of the request, and then for that information to be provided to the media and more up-to-date information to boot? Goodness gracious, what are we doing here?
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. Ms. Xavier, if I can request that all those undertakings for which the committee is waiting for the answers to come from the officials be provided as soon as possible, if the information is there. So it would be, for the functioning of the committee, I think it would be appropriate if those answers are provided to the committee members as soon as possible.
Absolutely, Madam Chair.
Ms. Kwan.
And for clarity, Madam Chair, I really want to know who blocked the information. I don't believe it's staff. I think someone else is blocking that information. I would like to know who blocked that information, who made the determination to make the delays for the tabling of the information to which staff said on the record that they readily have available.
Ms. Kwan, I've requested the officials that the information be provided to the committee members as soon as possible, and I will follow up via clerk. We will make sure that we follow up with the department and make sure that the information is sent to the clerk of the committee as early as possible. We can now go to the opening remarks by the officials. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. You can please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Bonjour, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to join the committee, and I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that the land from which I'm joining you today is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. As Associate Deputy Minister with Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, I recognize there is no institutional tolerance for racism or discrimination, and that IRCC must be committed to diversity and inclusion. Pour informer le comité de la façon dont le ministère
To inform the committee how the department is pursuing this principle, I'd like to look back at what we have been accomplishing recently through our anti-racism initiatives.
Here at IRCC. I think we have delved deeper into more complex aspects of racism, and many more participants have respectfully but frankly challenged the practices of the government and the department than had been in the case in past years. For example, on February 11th, we held an IRCC all-staff session to discuss systemic racism within IRCC policies and programs. It was one of the few times I've seen people talk so openly about the history of systemic racism and its lasting impacts on our programs and policies, specifically the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. It felt like we're finally confronting systemic racism in our own backyard, acknowledging it for what it has been. Le 18 février, nous avons tenu une séance de discussion.
On February 18, we held an employee town hall with guest speaker Dr. Rachel Zellers, a lawyer and scholar who focuses on race and diversity, as a chance to discuss vocabulary for leaders to use when faced with resistance, ignorance, and questions relating to race.
Profound timing, given the police actions against the protests in downtown Ottawa that were taking place that same day. Also in February, we joined with colleagues from Global Affairs Canada, National Defence, and Justice Canada to mark International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and to hear from Dr. Robert Livingston of the Harvard Kennedy School. As well, we have taken action through various trust circles with Indigenous, Black, and racialized employees, in addition to trauma workshops and other gatherings to give participants the opportunity to share their experiences with leaders such as myself without fear of reprisal. We are also employing disaggregated data collected at IRCC. It provides us with the ability to clearly spot disparities and to set a baseline from which we can measure progress. So we can see if we are actually addressing systemic biases that may affect not only our employees, but our clients, policies, decisions, and service delivery. But all of this is more than just talk. I am convinced that our actions to address anti-racism are producing results, and that our employees at IRCC are developing a new competency to examine our business lines and processes through an anti-racism lens. J'en déduis que le changement est en...
This tells me change is beginning. The behaviors and our culture are evolving. Of course, we are all at different points in our journeys to learn about racism.
All employees, and especially leaders in the organization, are truly understanding how fundamental diversity and inclusivity are now and will be to achieving our mandate. Il peut être difficile et désagréable.
Reaching these conclusions about race may be difficult and uncomfortable, but we must address them because some employees at IRCC still feel they face systemic racism.
Looking forward, the next phase for IRCC will be to build on these efforts by pulling the pieces together into a departmental strategy and action plan with performance indicators to hold ourselves accountable. We hope to release the next phase of this strategy and action plan to employees and stakeholders by the middle of 2022. In addition, IRCC has developed a quarterly anti-racism tracker to monitor the department's progress and to transparently report it to employees, deputies, and the minister, who has keenly expressed an interest in keeping abreast of our collective efforts. Madame la Présidente, je tiens à...
Madam Chair, I do want to stress to the committee that our work at IRCC is still a work in progress. And as we move forward with it, we will continue to be flexible, and we will strengthen diversity and inclusion in our workplace and workforce.
Greater diversity and equity is not only the right thing to do, but is the smart thing to do. We have an obligation to our employees and to all Canadians to do better, and we will. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Xavier. We will now go to a round of questioning. Before we begin, I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention. Yesterday, we celebrated Eid, and I brought some baklava from Scarborough for everyone. So members and the staff should have a bite. This is one of the success stories. This business of Crown Pastry was started by a Syrian refugee family in Scarborough a few years ago, and now that's the best placed for the baklava in GTA. So please do try. We will start our first round
Chair, I have a point of order.
Yes, Mr.
I am
Reddy.
unable to enjoy the baklava here in Saskatoon. How can we rectify that?
Yeah, well, let me know when you are in Ottawa next time. I will make sure that I bring it with me. Mr. Shafkat, you have raised your hand?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Mr. Ali, sorry.
Mr. Radekop has taken that same question.
Okay. We'll make sure that...
I was thinking that, you brought it there. It should have been, mailed out, or maybe courier service should have been provided to the member who are not in person there. So just wanted to...
everyone can enjoy it next time. We will now go to our round of questioning, and our first member is Mr. Jennis. Mr. Jennis, you will have 6 minutes. You can please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and for those members who are complaining about not having access to the excellent food, I just say you snooze, you lose, and I'll be thinking of you while I eat it. I want to really highlight in my remarks the issue of transparency, which I think has been some of the concerns we have been well articulated by Ms. Kwan. There's some additional information that a number of witnesses have told us that in terms of understanding the problems of racism within IRCC, that it's very important that they have data to look at. So I'm going to ask a series of questions, and I'm not asking you to provide the answers to these questions. I'm asking you to just tell me, are you able to provide these documents in writing? So hopefully the answer will be yes, and then I'll be able to proceed through this list. So the first thing that we have been asked for by witnesses is any and all documents and data in the department's possession that show acceptance and rejection rates for visa applications broken down by processing office, application category, country of origin of applicant, race, and religion. Are you able to provide that data to the committee?
Thank you for the request. We are able to provide an answer to that data, except what I want to add as a caveat is whether I can break it down to the level that you've asked for with regards to granularity. We would have to get back to you, but definitely can tell you the rate of rejection and acceptance as you've requested to a certain level.
Thank you. And just to clarify, what I'm asking for is not the provision of data that you don't have, but is all of the data in your possession that relates to that question. And I think, I certainly think, let's say a 30-day timeline is reasonable. Would you agree that for these requests, a 30-day timeline is reasonable?
Yes, I think that should work.
Thank you. We've been asked for a list of which visa offices currently use advanced analytics to triage applicants and which applications they are used for. Are you able to provide that in the same time frame?
I am able to provide you with what applications are using advanced analytics. The part that I'm less certain about is whether I can tell it to you by the offices that use them, just because the applications are perhaps more centralized and then various officers use them across the country and the globe, and it may not be specific to an office, if you see what I mean.
Okay, so I get...
Sorry for interrupting. All the questions should be directed through the chair.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So for clarity, we'd be looking for for information about which analytics models are being used and where they're being used. So the next one is any quality assurance reports for each advanced analytics model that is being used by a visa office. Are you able to provide that? Yeah, can that be provided?
So, Madam Chair, we are able to provide information with regards to our quality assurance framework and are able to provide some reports of some of the quality assurance activities that have taken place in the department.
Thank you. The current instructions to decision makers regarding the implementation of the advanced analytics pilot model for any processing centers that are using advanced analytics.
As we previously mentioned, I believe, Madam Chair, to this committee, we do have a framework that is in place that helps us to put in place advanced analytics model. And so we're able to share that guide, that playbook that is available that gives us the guidance with regards to advanced analytics, and assuming that's what is being sought by the member.
Thank you. Any training manuals or reviews regarding Watchtower and a list of all priority flags that have been used by Chinook, as well as Chinook Plus and GCMS Chinook user manuals?
Madam Chair, I'm not sure I understand the question exactly. I don't know that we have watchtowers or flags in manuals per se. So perhaps some clarity could be provided on that question.
My understanding is that there are priority flags that are used as part of the advanced analytics modules, and many witnesses have asked for lists of those priority flags as well as user manuals related to these documents.
So, Madam Chair, as I mentioned, we will definitely be able to provide and share the playbook that is provided with regards to the guidance of how we set up advanced analytics. And what we will be able to share is that which applications are using advanced analytics. As we've mentioned before, advanced analytics is used to be able where we have repetitive, simplistic analysis of information. It is not used to make decisions. So again, I caution in wanting to respond and saying that we actually have a document that talks to flags, because I'm not sure of that existing. However, I can always ask my colleague here, Madame Lang, if there's additional information you'd like to provide on that, if that's helpful, Madam Chair.
You know what, I can come back to this in my next round of questions, but just for my final minute, I'd like to share my time with Mr. Seaback, who wants to just provide a notice of motion, not move a motion, but to provide a notice of motion, and I'll resume these questions in my next round. Thank you.
Yes, hi, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be back at this committee, see some of my former colleagues. I am going to give verbal notice of a notice of motion that Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration report the following to the House. Significant delays in citizenship applications over 2 years risk disenfranchising Canadians who are waiting for their citizenship in order to vote, and this issue is particularly urgent in light of the June 2nd Ontario provincial election. The government should move quickly to address this issue so that all Canadians who are eligible for citizenship and who choose to apply are able to participate fully in our democratic life. In light of the situation, the committee requests a response from the Minister by letter by May 20th, outlining the actions taken and further actions intended.
Time is up for Mr. Janus. Now we will proceed to Mr. Al-Khouri. Mr. Al-Khouri, you will have 6 minutes. You can please begin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, et bienvenue à nos témoins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome to our witnesses. My first question is for Ms. Xavier. During this study, several people have advanced the argument that IRCC is funding fewer settlement groups. There are settlement agencies which are far more, or organizations that are far more generous. What is the funding policy for settlement on the part of our IRCC? Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question. We have more than 500 organizations who help newcomers. They have an agreement with us, and we identify very clearly the funds that are to be used in order to get help to newcomers. This said, and we also assess on a regular basis how services are delivered, and we often have the opportunity to discuss things to see how newcomers are getting settled in and progressing in their community to make sure our targets have been achieved as stipulated in our agreement with these organizations. So each agreement is very detailed, as are the expectations and funding. And we state also clearly what we expect from this funding. And could you please say a bit more about how you monitor the genuineness of a relationship, either in a sponsorship arrangement or in a family reunification arrangement? Answer. Well, in the legislation and in IRPA, we clearly identify how it is that we establish what are the family ties. There are very clear protocols about how to establish that there are family ties. And as well, we have a program to make sure that there is integrity in the implementation of services to newcomers. And as I said earlier, we assess things regularly to make sure that our expectations have been met. And we also poll the newcomers to see if their expectations, if what has been promised them has been met. So there's all of this, plus the legislation and the guides, the handbooks we give our people. We want to make sure that things are authentic. Question. Now, anyone can answer this, a question. Given the labor shortage and considering the fact that one report says that a very large percentage of potential newcomers are not given a socioeconomic assessment. Can you make any recommendations to this effect? Answer. Well, I can't make a recommendation along those lines, but I can tell you what we've learned through polls and studies and analyses with our support organizations for newcomers, also through academic research. I think we're assessing and we're starting to really understand, along with our colleagues from Employment Canada, we're making sure that needs are met in order to meet the needs of people who need the labor shortage needs. And we review this every year, and we table a report to Parliament. In our conversations with our partners in the provinces and territories, we make sure that that everyone has properly understood the issues and the shortcomings, and that we can make sure that immigrants coming to Canada respond to our labor needs and also socio-economic needs. Last question to Ms. Boisclair. Various people have looked at whether or not it's a good idea to use an intersectional approach in your work. Can you tell us, in your opinion, can you give us an answer in greater detail? Do you think, in your recommendation, do you want to manifest this in your policy recommendations?
What I will say is that the department is working on a disaggregated data framework and working with its partners in Statistics Canada to be able to look at disaggregated data within our policy programs and services.
Thank you. Time is up. We will now proceed to Mr. Brunel Desep. Mr. Brunel Desep, you will have 6 minutes. You can please begin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have a point of order. I didn't want to interrupt anyone. I'll interrupt myself. I'd just like you to rule on the fact that there was a vote. So do we go to 1 p.m. or 1:30 p.m.?
And that's where we have to stop. It's a hard stop at 1:30 because we don't have services available after that.
Donc, je propose, est-ce que tout le monde est d'accord qu'on aille jusqu'à 13h30?
So can I get everyone's agreement that we go to 1:30 p.m.? Okay. So I'd like to thank all our witnesses helping us to continue this important study and helping us to make recommendations that will be important for the department. So, Ms. Xavier, in your brief to the committee, you talk about regulated Nigerian immigration consultants. Now, are there differences in processing Nigerian students and other other immigrants? You talk about the Nigerian Express program. Can you please give us some details on that? Answer. Well, I can't tell you why this information hasn't been published. It's a pilot program, so it's still in pilot mode, and I think that may be the reason why. But it's not for any reasons of transparency. We make sure that everyone is aware of the existence of this program, so it's nothing that was done on purpose. Question. Well, I think that it might be a good idea for your department to put this information on your internet site. What about eligibility criteria for Nigerian Students Express? Answer. Well, thank you for your question. We're always assessing how programs work. All our programs at IRCC, but specifically, we're going to continue to evaluate our student programs and everything related to the Student Express program. This will be part of our continuing assessment. We'll look at the criteria and see if things are working well. But in general, we do try to make sure of the quality in our quality control. We are always evaluating whether our programs meet the needs. Question. I'm going to remain with the African content. In the Canadian Embassy at Dakar, this embassy processes applications from 16 countries. That's millions and millions of people. Don't you think that that might be a problem? I'd like to hear what you have to say about this, because some people say it's not. This doesn't make sense. Answer. Well, it's true that there is an enormous volume of demands, of applications, and on a regular basis, we evaluate and re-evaluate and look at where our resources are located. Now, this said, one of the things we have improved and we're continuing to improve as an organization, and this especially since the pandemic, is how to move and reallocate resources and how to allocate work worldwide. Now, again, we're constantly trying to make sure that the quality of information is there. And we also try to make sure that we are responding even more rapidly and more effectively to applications. Question. Thank you. I know you're assessing things, but what about the office in Dakar? Because the pool of applications for one single office, I'm wondering if there isn't a certain rate of refusal because of the very number of the volume of applications. And what about racial prejudice? Because this office is in Africa, and it services 16 African nations. So what do you have to say about this? Answer. Thank you for your question. I can't give you specifics about the office in Dakar, but excuse me, I'm sorry, but you said that a few seconds ago. If you're assessing things, are you, at the present time, assessing the effectiveness of the office in Dakar? Are you assessing this? Answer. Well, I can't talk specifically about the assessment of the office in Dakar. Well, you just said you were assessing certain offices. Answer. No. What I was trying to say, Madam Chair, is that in our work on a regular basis, we constantly evaluate all our offices, including Dakar. And so, Madam Chair, I think I can get back to you to talk or to give you specific information about the Dakar office. But we are constantly evaluating and analyzing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan, you will have 6 minutes. You can please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the officials for appearing before our committee. First, I'd like to ask the officials about the Chinook tool. Is there any quality assurances application in place for the Chinook tool? And if yes, what is it? If not, why not?
Thank you for the question. So when Chinook was established, we did do an assessment of the use of Chinook in terms of ensuring that it adhered to all of the Treasury Board guidelines and all of the necessary procedures that are required to respect privacy and things of that nature. So there's not a evaluation underway at this point in time because it was already done at a moment in time. So just to be clear, I just want to make sure I'm answering the question that was posed.
Well, thank you. It is my understanding that when Chinook was deployed, the department actually had a number of different modules, including a sixth module, which is to deal with the quality assurance component. It was discovered that there were bugs, software bugs with respect to that, so then it was never applied. One would think then that the department would go about fixing the bugs so that you would actually have an application of quality assurance to the Chinook system, but it sounds like there isn't. And there's been significant concerns with the use of Chinook raised by witnesses, and to which, understandably then, the witnesses are calling for an independent assessment of Chinook. So it sounds like the department is actually not doing any quality assurance on Chinook at the moment with this application.
Madam Chair, if I may, my colleague, Madam Lang, would have some additional information to clarify and answer to the member, if that's okay.
Answer, because I have additional questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to be clear, that Chinook is a tool that's designed to simplify the visual representation of information that is in GCMS, the Global Case Management System.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt here for a minute here, Madam Chair. I'm asking for quality assurance program and not how Chinook
Absolutely.
works. So please don't give me answers on how it works.
So it is simply a system that an officer uses to make a decision. If we were to implement a quality assurance framework, which we have, it is on our officers' decisions. It would not be on the Chinook system itself, because Chinook does not keep any privacy information. It does not retain information from the Global Case Management System. So all of our decision makers have quality assurance exercises that are used to complete the verifications of whether the decision was correct or not. Your question about, Madam Chair, the quality assurance system and module itself was simply not a module within Chinook to do quality assurance, but was a way in which officers could also use the Global Case Management System to identify flags to verify quality assurance exercises that were completed.
Thank you. Maybe I can then ask the officials, Madam Chair, to table to the committee their quality assurance program and its application for all of the tools that apply and how it is applied. And if the official can also provide the data on what stream and what country these quality assurance programs is being used and the results coming out of them. And with respect to the results, if, for example, the application of quality assurance is being applied and the results don't check out, so you looked into it, and even in this instance with Chinook, with individuals making the assessment, the numbers don't, the outcome does not check out, then what are the next steps? Are applications then re-evaluated by someone else? How does the officials or the department deal with that? So if I can get that information then.
Yes. Absolutely. We can provide the background on the QA assurance. I think that was asked previously by one of the members. So, Madam Chair, that would be no problem. In terms of reconsideration of quality assurance decisions, it depends on the line of business. So there are different mechanisms that could be considered. So there could be reconsideration of a decision by an existing officer. A decision could be reconsidered by a new officer. There are different mechanisms available if we find that a decision was made improperly.
If we can then get the information on how that is being applied, under what stream and in what country, broken down accordingly, and where there are concerns raised, I would like to actually know how often are applications re-examined and how often is it being sent to someone else for an examination, and then what is the outcome of that? So that is to say the decisions differ from the original assessment versus the reassessment by someone else. If I can get that data, that would be appreciated. On the issue around anti-racism training, we had witnesses who actually came forward and raised the concern that on anti-racism training, to which IRCC acknowledged racism exists within the department. And they're saying that what needs to be done is not a sort of a module to which people can go through, but really in-depth training. So I'm interested in knowing what kind of anti-racism training is being done within the department right now for its middle managers and executive level staff.
Thank you very much for the question. We're in full agreement that training in the form of online training in particular, or a module, is not the only mechanism or the only tool that is being used within the department or should be used in order to improve.
Sorry for interrupting, Ms. Xavier. The time is up for Ms. Kwan. You can come back in the second round. We will now proceed to our second round, and the second round will start with Mr. Reddycop. Mr. Reddycop will have 5 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to come back to the issues raised by Ms. Kwan at the beginning of our meeting. I'm disturbed at the way that the government is ignoring the will of Parliament and this committee by delaying, blocking, and withholding documents requested by this committee. And we just heard all about that at the beginning. And just for some clarity, since I don't trust the department to respond in a timely manner, I would like to clarify Ms. Kwan's earlier request by asking that the information requested by Ms. Kwan earlier in the meeting would be tabled by 4 p.m. on Monday, May the 10th. Is that clear, Madam Chair?
Sorry for interrupting. So you would like that to be tabled by this coming Monday?
Yes, Monday, May 10th. Yeah, and I think it's reasonable that it was indicated that the information is available.
Ms. Kwan actually requested for 3 days initially when she put in the request. So,
okay.
Yeah, so I think we will have to go by that. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
You can please begin.
I want to switch to talk about the production of papers motion that which directly relates to this racism study. And as you're aware, I put forward this production of papers motion back in February, supported unanimously by the committee, requiring the department to provide documents related to racism. The officials were given a deadline of March 30th, which was complied with. However, until last week, we as committee members didn't know that the department failed to comply with the rule to submit everything in both official languages. We had to get it translated after the fact. The department also failed to abide by Parliament's absolute authority when it comes to examining original and unredacted documents. I just want to read a passage from the House of Commons Procedure and Practice, page 137, quote, "By virtue of the preamble in Section 18 of the Constitution Act 1867, Parliament has the ability to institute its own inquiries, to require the attendance of witnesses, and to order the production of documents, rights which are fundamental to its proper functioning. These rights are as old as Parliament itself. The power to send for persons, papers, and records has been delegated by the House of Commons to its committees in the standing orders. It is well established that Parliament has the right to order any and all documents to be laid before it which believes are necessary for its information. The power to call for persons, papers, and records is absolute, but it is seldom exercised without consideration of the public interest. The House of Commons recognizes that it should not require the production of documents in all cases, considerations of public policy, including national security, foreign relations, and so forth," end quote. My motion explicitly excluded national security and cabinet confidence, yet the documents provided to this committee that were redacted by your department by the department on the basis of solicitor-client privilege, as found in the Access to Information Act, disregards this absolute power of Parliament. Our committee received a letter from the House of Commons law clerk that stated, and I quote, "The House and its committee's power to order the production of records constitutes a constitutional parliamentary privilege that is not limited by the exemptions found in the Access to Information Act," end quote. As a result, our committee met and decided that our chair would write the deputy minister with a deadline of 4 p.m. yesterday that the documents be sent to this committee unredacted. Yet the deputy minister wrote back reaffirming redactions on the basis of solicitor-client privilege. She said, and I quote, "Redactions have been applied to 2 documents under Section 23 of the Access to Information Act for the protection of solicitor-client privilege," end quote. So to Madame Xavier, can you confirm that your department, Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada, is aware that you have breached parliamentary privilege?
Thank you for the question. What I'm aware of is that indeed, when we submitted the package originally, there were a few pages that were needed to be translated or improved in the way in which that they were translated. And I do believe that we have complied with that as of April 29th, when we sent we submitted the second package to the clerk. The government is of the view that it cannot compel the disclosure of information such as solicitor-client privileged information.
So if you were just listening to what I read, though, that is not the case, and you don't seem to be overly concerned about this. it's clear that Parliament has the right to require all these documents, and the law clerk is the one who actually does the redacting. So do you take what we're doing seriously here, or is this another case of the government ignoring the will of Parliament and doing whatever it wants to?
Madam Chair, we take very seriously the work of this committee and are very much looking forward to the recommendations of this study to be able to help us to do our job even better.
So the fact that the department is not willing to let the law clerk do the redactions and is doing their own redactions, does that mean that there's potentially another Liberal government cover-up here that we should be concerned about?
Madam Chair, I'm not aware of any cover-ups that are being attempted to be had. At this point in time, the interpretation is that the information related to solicitor-client privilege is of the view of the government that it cannot be compelled to make this disclosure.
So just to make sure you understand how this works, the parliamentary law clerk is supposed to see the unredacted documents first, and then he can determine if anything needs to be redacted. If your department does the redacting, then the law clerk is unable to determine the accuracy of these redactments. So do you not trust the parliamentary law clerk to do their job?
Thank you for the comment and the question. I have nothing to do with regards to not trusting the law clerk. This is not me trying to be difficult, or the department for that matter trying to be difficult. What I would recommend is that we explore what could be the art of the possible with regards to the proposal, with regards that the law clerk potentially look at the redacted information in case this was an oversight from our perspective.
I think that's specifically what the law clerk asked, was that he wants to be able to see the unredacted documents so that he can determine that. And so another option here would be, if you don't think the law clerk can do his job properly, would the department be willing to provide the unredacted documents to this committee in camera? And that way we can review the documents without making them public. Do you trust parliamentarians to do this work?
I do trust the parliamentarians, Madam Chair, are doing the work that is necessary to do to ensure transparency to Canadians. With that said, I do think that I will take back what has been provided as advice here to see what would be the best course of action for the way forward.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And I do find these answers a little bit disappointing. And hopefully when our report on privilege is completed, we can have a fulsome discussion at committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Reddycop, we will now proceed to Ms. Kayabaga. Ms. Kayabaga, you will have 5 minutes for your round of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would just like to start by thanking the officials for extending their time and having to have unfair conversations that are being thrown at them this morning. There are some questions that are not fair to be asked to the officials this morning, so I'll start by there. I would like to start my questions with Farah Boisclair, who is the director of Anti-Racism Task Force. Mrs. Boisclair, can you tell me how long you've been doing this role, and what was the original mandate when you started this role?
Thank you for the question. The task force was established back in mid-2020, and this was following the murder of George Floyd. The department, there had been a lot of conversations happening within the department and a willingness to tackle systemic racism. I mean, this was a global movement across the world, within Canada, and the public service was no different. And so the task force was established with the scope of looking at systemic racism and guiding the department to look at systemic racism within how we manage our people, our employees, and also our public-facing programs and policies, and as how we deliver our services as well.
Thank you for that. So basically, you're able to respond to where we're at now based on the work that you've been doing since 2020. But when we address some of the issues that have been brought up in IRCC around, let's say, refusal rates or other comments around, some of the witnesses have mentioned racism in the Chinook program or in the processing or the refusal rates for African countries. I don't think personally that that's something that you can answer to. And I personally think that it's unfair for you to have to answer that question. So I'm going to go to maybe Madam Xavier. So there has been, comments around, I think, the response as to why there's higher rates of refusals in the African Francophone countries. And one of the responses that we received was that perhaps some students switch streams when they arrive here. Has that number changed over the last, I don't know, course of 10 years or 15 years? Has that number ever shifted, or is it still the same number of people who are switching streams?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. I'm going to ask Madam Lang to give you some additional information, as she may have a little bit more detail to be clearer in her response.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. In terms of switching streams, I do not have those statistics at my fingertips, but what I do know is that overall approval rates have increased over the past couple years significantly, almost up to, I think it was threefold between 2016 and 2019 in terms of approval rates for African students. So I would really appreciate the opportunity to get the data correct for the chair. Thank you.
That's interesting because the information that we have is higher rates of refusals for African students, especially from Francophone countries. I'm not sure if that data came from your department or if because the data we have, the refusal rates are up to 70, 80%, and there was a study done during COVID to review, and it showed that specific African countries, mainly Francophone countries, had higher rates of refusals. Can you comment on that, or can someone else in your department comment on that?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question, and I apologize, I don't think I understood the question correctly. So we are committed to a fair and non-discriminatory application of immigration laws, and volumes of temporary resident visa and study permit applications from Africa have tripled from 2016 to 2019 across the top 8 source countries from Africa, with the number of refusals are generally increasing in relative proportion. IRCC understands that the applicants, as well as the schools that accepted them, are disappointed when an application is refused. But there is no great difference between application approval rates for applicants from French-speaking African countries and other countries in the region, or between the approval rates for those destined to Quebec.
So are you saying that, so I think maybe you're answering the wrong question. My question is, there is higher rates of refusals for
yes, there
African
are.
Students. Perhaps maybe you're trying to say that the language has no play in this. Well, one of the suggestions that we heard from witnesses here is that we open more offices across the continent to make sure that we reduce or we tackle this higher rate of refusals. Can you comment on the tools that you intend to take? And I really hope that you do have the same data we have, because if you don't, then we're going to be having a different conversation, because witnesses have come forward and have provided us with some things that we can do to address that. And if we don't have the same numbers, then we're going to have a hard time addressing that. Can someone in your department who has this information comment on that?
Yes, absolutely. We can get more clarity, but Madam Chair, I think I misunderstood the question. So it is true that African students have a higher refusal rate than other top source countries of students coming to Canada. And the most common reasons for refusals include applicants being unable to show officers that they're able to support themselves in Canada, or that they would leave Canada if they no longer had legal status in the future.
Sorry, I'll cut you right there. My apologies.
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up. We will now proceed to Mr. Brunel Desep. Mr. Brunel Desep, you will have 2.5 minutes. You can please begin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been going through the numbers while my colleague put her questions. There are 6 offices in Europe which deal with visas. 6 offices in Europe. So 124,000 per bureau. In Africa, it's a far higher number. Can you tell me why there are more offices for Europe and fewer for Africa? Answer. Thank you, Madam Chair. No, we don't have offices. The number of offices doesn't mean one continent is more important than the other. Often, It's because we want to increase Francophone immigration. So we don't think one continent is more important than another. But what I said earlier is that we assess these things and we assess demands in order. We look at these things and then we make recommendations after evaluating possibilities for future offices. But we do this with the intent to have the resources available to make these funds available where they're needed. Question. So what is it? How can you explain this difference in ratio? Why are you so behind in dealing with applications from Africa? Answer. Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if we're behind. It is true that when we set up an office, we have to meet several criteria. We have to make sure that the countries where we want to set up a mission or an office, we have to make sure that the volume is there, that we will have officers to work there, officials to work there. This is how we decide about where we're going to set up an office, and we decide this in cooperation with Global Affairs Canada. Question. Every time we get these answers with pretexts and excuses, and I know, Ms. Xavier, you're defending your department, but these things always seem to lead to problems. It seems to me there's a major difference between Africa and Europe. And I talk about this and all I get are excuses. Why can't you assess these things rapidly? If you do, I think you would notice that there's a problem and you have to deal with it.
Maybe you can come back in the next round. We will now go to Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan, you will have 2.5 minutes. You can please begin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just to clarify from my last question, I would like the officials to provide information on the kind of training to which middle management and executives are undertaking with respect to the anti-racism training. And then also answer the question on how effective or how is the effectiveness of the training being evaluated, and what recourse is there if the evaluation indicates that the training has not been effective. So if I could get that response from officials to the committee, I would appreciate that. I'd like to also then now ask this question. Witnesses have indicated that there is differential treatment for resettlement organizations whose primary mandate or focus is on women. And they indicated that often they're being asked to provide extra accountability measures, extra requirements is layered on them, and even to some degree, their assessment officer feel compelled to do so. Otherwise, that assessment officer would be mocked by colleagues in the department. This is absolutely extremely concerning. So I would like to ask the officials to table the practices that the department undertakes for accountability measures for resettlement organizations. And if it's being applied to organizations in the same way, or if not, how do they differ and why is it different then in its application? So I would appreciate that if I can get that information from the officials. Earlier we were talking about processing delays. And they are not, I'm interested in this information. With respect to processing delays, could the officials provide information to the committee to advise how often is the processing delay related to the lack of immigration levels numbers? And so, in other words, it's not so much that the staff hasn't processed the application, but rather the processed application is sitting on a shelf in somebody's office somewhere because they don't have the immigration levels numbers to accommodate it. I would love to get that information from the officials, if I might. And finally, Madam Chair, I'd like to ask for this information too. Oftentimes, applications are delayed and it might be differential treatment or something else. But the steps where it's hung often is tied to CBSA with respect to security screening. And so I would really like to know how many applications that are delayed and is as a result of the security screening not having been processed through. And if we can get that information broken down by country and region, that would be appreciated.
Ms. Kwan, your time is up. We will now go to Mr. Redekop for 5 minutes. Mr. Redekop, you can please begin.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I believe Mr. Janis was going next.
Mr. Janis is not here in the room. Mr. Benzin. Okay. Mr. Benzin will take that. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, witnesses. Brad, thank you. One of the things we've heard from applicants is that some regions are underserved by visa application centers, especially in terms of getting their medical tests done. And they have to travel to another country. They have to spend a lot of money and time. And then before they get their application process, before they get a meeting, in some cases, their medical exam timeline is expired. And they have to repeat this all over again with additional costs. I'm curious why every country, it's my understanding that every country has doctors and they have clinics. Why is it that, we're not having a doctor or a clinic in every country certified or recognized to take these medical exams so that applicants are not having to spend all this money and travel to other locations to get their medical exams done?
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. So as our intent is very much to ensure that when people are submitting their applications, and in particular their medical exams, that they have access to certified panel physicians. We do aim to try and ensure that there's as much visibility of the panel physicians throughout the world. I don't have at my fingertips exactly how many of them there are. I do, 577 panel physicians certified throughout the world. But to that point, they may not be in every country as per the question that is being proposed. Having said that, when we certify a panel physician, we have to ensure that they will be able to adhere to the standards that we're looking for. And that may be the reason why certain countries may not have panel physicians, or the availability of those physicians have to exist as well for us to be able to certify them. And they have to be willing to want to be part of the network and adhere to the evaluation standards and processes. So it's hard to give a more specific answer unless speaking to a specific country, but just want to generally say that the intent is to minimize delays with regards to examinations, trying to make as much as possible the availability of panel physicians throughout the world so that this is not an additional delay for applicants.
I'm just curious, in the sense that if because of maybe it's COVID or other restrictions, and the file cannot be processed in time, why can't the medical tests also be extended so they don't have to have? I have in my particular writing, I have a case where it's a family, so it's not one person. There's multiple costs. And the first time it was around $5,000 to get it done, and now they've had to do it a second time, and they only have 60 days now to get it done, and they're not sure they can get the money to do it. So why can't, in those cases, their medical exams be extended?
Thank you for the question. I won't be able to comment specifically on the case, but in general, there have been times when we have been able to extend the medical exam expiration, and we've done that especially within the last 2 years because of border restrictions. We've applied public policies that permitted that to certain cohorts of our applicants for that exact reason, and recognizing that it wasn't of their doing and that they needed more ability to have flexibility in the application process. So it is something that is looked at and reflected accordingly, depending.
Okay, thank you. You know, in one of the things we've heard in this process is the use of AI, and the use of the AI was to triage simple files from complex files to handle the work more efficiently. There must be a decision tree process or chart that shows, you know, the steps that are involved to go one direction or the other direction. So could you please tell us the structure of the decision tree chart and the decision making? And also, could you provide to this committee that chart or some written documentation to show how that decision tree works? Because I think it's very important that we understand, it be transparent how that decisions are made to what becomes a simple file or a more complex file.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Madam Lang does have some preliminary information to share related to the question asked.
Yes, thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Absolutely. For each of our advanced analytic line of business, there is a decision tree chart, as it were, and a governance structure. It would be different depending on the line of business and the type of advanced analytics, and we can take that back for sure and see what can be provided to the committee.
Okay, so for each of the different lines, you'll
sorry for interrupting, Mr. Benson. Your time is up. We will now proceed to Ms. Lalonde for 5 minutes. Ms. Lalonde, you will have 5 minutes. You can please begin.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank each of you for having come to appear today. I have 2 questions. The first, and I've thought about this a bit, the IRCC data on the refusal rate indicate that people applying for student visas from Africa, well, we see that Francophone Africa or Francophone Africans have a much higher refusal rate. According to the department, what are the causes of the discrepancies in rates? And what is the department doing to reduce these refusal rates? Thank you for your question. As my colleague Ms. Lang said, it's clear there are refusal rates, and there are various reasons why someone's application might be refused. I'm going to ask Ms. Lang to give you more detail.
Chair, for the question. And absolutely, depending on the part of the country that you are in, you are subject to the same regulations and the same laws when you're applying to come to Canada to be a student. And you are correct that right now we are seeing higher refusal rates from African countries for those destined to Canada to study. In terms of what we are doing to examine this and where we can go from here, we are delivering unconscious bias training to all officers across Canada and the world. So regardless of whether you're situated in Africa or you're situated in Ottawa, you all receive that training. We're also trying to support the review of all policies and programs to identify systemic racism, barriers, and disparate impacts on racialized groups. I think my colleague Farah Boisclair spoke earlier about disaggregated data. So the more we can learn about disaggregated data, we can dig into, are there issues that we should be focusing on specific to certain continents, certain decisions with Africa in mind, but not only Africa, all countries to whom Canada welcomes. We're also implementing mitigation plans to reduce racial disparities across programs and procedures based on systemic review, data mapping, and external sources to identify and address bias in decision-making and risk management, including our automation practices. And as mentioned earlier, we conduct quality assurance exercises on a regular basis across all of our lines of business, and we are committed to looking at the higher rates of refusal for African countries and seeing if there is there's anything that we can do differently, and if there is a reason behind that besides simply it is a just and law-based refusal. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could, si je pourrais ajouter, Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, I'd like to add that this is the reason why we brought in direct streams for students. It's a way of ensuring that if someone cannot be settled in a country, there is another pathway or another stream that might be more effective. Thank you for your answer. And I'd like to get back to something again. I have a question with respect to what you just said. On that point, Ms. Xavier, might it be possible to look at how we could develop better practices with other countries? No, I understand there are financial issues to do with the banking system in certain countries, but is there anything that you could recommend to the committee that would help us meet our targets and our objectives, which are to have a better, stronger immigration system, and to look at refusal rates in certain Francophone countries? Answer. Thank you very much for your question. Well, in some countries, applications aren't properly filled in. In some countries, not necessarily in Africa. Some forms, some applications haven't been properly filled out, and people perhaps have a hard time understanding how to fill out the application. But there are consultants available in some countries to help them, but the quality of these consultation services aren't always the same. It seems when there is a higher success rate, it's because there are consultants there to provide help. And then because the application form is a far better quality. Now, we can sometimes we try to do this through our mission or our office or with consultants, anything that would help them to immigrate to Canada.
We will now, this ends our second round. We will now start our third round with Mr. Jenis for 5 minutes. Mr. Jenis, you can please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I need to go quite quickly to get all this in the time. So again, what I'm looking for from officials isn't the specific answers in terms of the information, but just confirmation that this information can be provided to the committee within the 30-day timeline. Course content and materials used for any anti-racism training or information sessions conducted for IRCC employees. Are we able to provide that?
Yes, Madam Chair. I do believe that was an undertaking by another member. We are able to provide that information.
Thank you. The current and historical processing times for each visa office and category from 2015 until now.
Thank you for the question. Yes, we are able to provide that data. It may take us a little bit of time because you're asking from 2015. However, we will endeavor to provide that information.
Thank you. The raw and complete responses that IRCC employees provided to Polaris Strategic Insights for the anti-racism study, obviously with personal identifiers not included.
Thank you for the request. The Polaris report was done by an independent firm that we contracted to do it, and it was done on an anonymous basis. So the information that is provided on the Library and Archives website, as well as that of our intranet, is exactly the information we have. We don't have any additional information to provide you more background on that because it was intentionally done in an anonymous manner so that there would be no fear of concerns by the employees.
Thank you. That sounds reasonable, and I'll follow up if the stakeholders have any further suggestions around that. All contracts IRCC holds with Deloitte & Touche LLP, Accenture, and McKinsey regarding artificial intelligence, digital platform modernization, Chinook, and the Digital Service Response Project.
I will have to assess whether that's something feasible, because with regards to the digital platform modernization, this continues to be a project that is underway and right now in the contracting process itself. And so there is no contracting that has occurred with regards to digital platform modernization, in particular phase 3, for which the funding was recently provided in budget 2021. And so as a result, the work is underway, and there has been vendors engaged, but there's an actual very clear outlined RFP that will be put out to be able to do the necessary steps on that.
Oh, okay, thank you. So if you could provide what along those lines is available and information as contracts are signed. Privacy analysis conducted with respect to Chinook and contracts between IRCC and Apply Board and between IRCC and Apply Proof since 2015.
Madam Chair, if those information exists with regards to Apply Board and the other, we will provide that information as well as the privacy analysis that was requested.
Thank you. Project launch, terms of reference, and roadmap documents for the service transition strategy and roadmap, the IMIT strategic and roadmap project, TDSS innovation strategy.
Madam Chair, if that information exists, we will provide it to the committee.
Thank you. IRCC policy playbook on automated support for decision-making, all additions, and any additional programming information and instructions used for advanced analytical systems.
Thank you for the request. With regards to the playbook, it continues to be an evergreen document for the reasons that we continue to update it as we learn more of what we need to be doing with regards to that, but absolutely we can provide it. And I do believe it's also an undertaking by the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am aware that some of these items may overlap with things that other members have asked for, and I want to recognize the good work done by all members in terms of this. We are getting asked by stakeholders for this kind of information because it's in the interest of transparency and helps them to understand how to hold the government accountable and also how to advise Canadians about the way these decisions are made. If I can, just in the remaining time, in response to another member, it was said that basically quality assurance is done on the staffing side because the systems like Chinook inform decisions made by staff, and it's the staff making the decision. But at the end of the day, if those systems are informing those decisions, and those systems require some quality assurance mechanisms as well, right? Have I understood the dynamics right? And what's your response on that?
Thank you. If I might take this response, Madam Chair. Chinook as a processing tool and advanced analytics are different entities. So Chinook is simply a triage tool that we use to pull information from GCMS. So an officer basically says, I would like to pull information XYZ, and then puts it in an easy to read table from which they will then make their decision. Then that table is wiped clean and they start again with a new process. So in that instance, the QA is done on the decision.
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up. Maybe we will come back in next round. We will now proceed to Mr. Ali. Mr. Ali, you will have 5 minutes. You can please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all officials for being here. Madam Chair, I will be sharing my time with Ms. Kayabaga. So my question is to Ms. Buckler. The committee recently heard from a witness that the Citizenship and Immigration Department is diverse, but that outcome of the decision on applicants' cases might be more equitable if the officer who make the actual decision shared the culture of the applicants whose cases they were deciding. Do you know whether the group of immigration officers who make decisions on cases are at least as diverse as the department as a whole?
I will say that we are looking at the demographics of our workforce on a quarterly basis, and we've recently have been looking at it from a disaggregated data perspective, and we look at our workforce in tiers now. At what's the representation at the entry level, at the middle manager level, and at the executive level. And against those, we've set ambitious targets that are higher than the norm within government to hold ourselves to a higher standard. And so that is something that we strive to get to. But I'll pass the ball. I'll pass it to Deputy Xavier if she wants to add anything to that.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Just to add to what Madame Boisclair has shared, we do, as part of the training and requirements for our decision-making officers, provide them with cultural training with regards to being culturally sensitive, even though they may not be coming from that culture. But to Madame Boisclair's point, the intent is to continue to diversify our workforce throughout the world and throughout the domestic world as well, in order to continue to ensure that we have an inclusive view and diverse views when people are reviewing decisions. I would also add, in particular for our international network, there is also the addition of our locally engaged staff, which are very helpful in providing advice with regards to culture, the local culture, and what could be possibly influencing some of the applications. And that's taken very much into consideration as part of the work we do. And they have responded to surveys, the locally engaged staff have, and have provided information to help us continue to strengthen our cultural awareness with regards to the applications that are being submitted across the globe.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would share my time with Ms. Kayabagha. You can ask questions, please.
Thank you to my colleague for allowing me, Madam Chair, to ask the question again. I just wanted to go back to the question that I didn't get a chance to finish to get an answer from. And if we could go to Madam Xavier to answer this question on, from, the first part of the comment was that there are, we're looking to see if these students are going to go back to their country. Can we go back to that, given that, we're looking for labor shortages in our country to respond to that? And why is it that if it's coming from African students, we want to enforce those rules versus other parts of the world?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Just to start off, that every application that is submitted for an international student, or any application for that matter, but in particular, because we're talking about international students, each application is looked at on its own merit and its own application in the unique way in which it's submitted. So we are not looking at it from the perspective that because it's Africa, that is why it should be responded to in some manner. It's all based on the data that we have in
my
the completed
apologies to
application.
cut you, Mrs. Xavier. I do emphasize on that question because this is a response that we had received from your team. So I go back to the specific mentions, fraud or financial reasons, or potentially not going back. Can you respond to why these are measures that IRCC is taking when it comes to African students versus other students from across the world?
Thank you for the question. What I'm trying to say is those measures, whether it's fraud, reasons of finance, reasons of not returning, are looked at for all applications and not just applications of students originating from Africa.
Thank you. So if there's higher rates of refusals in African countries, can you comment as to why? Witnesses have said that they think racism is involved. Do you think the same?
Thank you for the question. What we think is that it's possible that racism could be at play, but part of what we're doing is that analysis to do that quality assurance, as we've been discussing, to ensure whether or not the application has been looked at through the lens of the facts provided against
for the sake
the
of
rules
time,
that must be applied.
Mrs. Xavier.
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up for Ms. Kayabagha. We will now proceed to Mr. Brunel Desep for 2.5 minutes. And just a reminder, if members are moving in the room, they should please wear masks. So these are the health measures we have to make sure that we follow. So we will now proceed to Mr. Brunel Desep for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Okay, on va essayer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, okay, let's get to the issue of solutions. Ms. Boisclair, I have a question for you. A few weeks ago, there was a witness who recommended that we tape interviews, that we record them, and also look at the report. This way we could track the interview. We would have that information. What do you think of that, Ms. Boisclair? Thank you for the question. Well, the committee's recommendations are of great interest to us, so that's my answer. Well, you're also here at the committee appearing as a witness, and I'd like to hear what you have to say, because that would help us draft our recommendations. I don't know if one of our witnesses has any ideas about that. Thank you for your question and your suggestion. We're not here to share our opinions, but we will look at all recommendations made by the committee, and we can assess which might be possible, which ones make sense to help us meet the objectives in our mandate. Well, I have another question. Do you think it would be doable to have some mechanism that would allow you to record interviews? Is that feasible in your department? Well, what I would recommend is that that's something we could analyze and see if it's feasible. I can't give you a straightforward answer saying that we can do that kind of thing. I can't say that, but we can make sure that information is maintained in a way that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Yes, please continue. So, yes, I can tell you that absolutely it's feasible. I don't know how it would be done. And what I would say, Madam Chair, is that we're open to the committee's recommendations, and we can look into what's doable. Thank you, Ms. Xavier.
We'll now proceed to Ms. Kwan for 2.5 minutes. Ms. Kwan, please begin.
Thank you. Officials said that they're now analyzing policies and programs within IRCC in relation to systemic racism. Could the officials provide an outline on how this work is being done to the committee? And for example, with things like the economic conditions of a country be part of the consideration related to this work. So I would like to sort of get an understanding on how this work is being done and what that timeline is, and also if officials can advise if the report, when it's completed, would be made public.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the request. I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question. And so as was mentioned, we are doing a lot of work with regards to analyzing and reviewing our policies and programs and our client service delivery to ensure that it is, we're removing barriers related to systemic racism, and that is an ongoing work in progress. And so whatever work that is underway related to that, we will be able to provide to the committee. And I believe there's a request for it to be provided when it is completed, but this will be ongoing work. It's not just one moment in time. It's part of what we're committing to.
Thank you. Maybe I can ask for then the officials to table to the committee the work that you are doing. So all the various different kinds of work that you're doing to address the issue around racism and systemic racism within IRCC. And if I could actually get information from officials then, to what extent are applications being refused because of the economic conditions of the country? If we can get that broken down by streams, I would appreciate it. I don't know if they collect the data, but if they do, I would like to get that. Lastly, I'd like to also get information on the backlog. This is in response to the response from the officials. Paper applications are still stuck in the system, as I understand, and that is not being counted on the backlogs. So I wonder if officials can advise the committee how many offices are still dealing with paper backlog in the mailroom, and if we can get that information listed by country and offices, and if they have the information on how many applications are still stuck in that circumstances, I would appreciate that. Madam Chair, after this, I do have one other point of order issue that I would like to raise. before the committee adjourns?
Your time is up for like now. We have two more people for this third round of questioning. We will have 5 minutes for Mr. Redekop and 5 minutes for Mr. Dhaliwal and end this panel. So we can go to Mr. Redekop for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Xavier, I want to read our exchange from March the 24th. Quote, the High Commissioner appeared at this committee asking for the country of Bangladesh to be admitted into the student direct stream. I specifically asked the Minister on March 3rd if he could make every effort to have Bangladesh enter into the direct stream program for foreign students, and his answer was that he was certainly open to it. For the Associate Deputy Minister, it's been 20 days or so. First of all, has the Minister talked to you about getting Bangladesh into the student direct stream? Can you confirm that Bangladesh is in the process of being considered for SDS right now? And your response was, I cannot personally confirm it, but I can double check, end of quote. So to recap, I wrote the Minister in December on this issue. He hasn't responded. I asked the Minister at this committee and didn't get a response. And then I asked you on March 24th. You said you would double check. So I've been waiting 152 days. And of course, Bangladeshi students have been waiting much longer than that. So I'm going to try once again. Can you confirm for this committee that Bangladesh is in the process of being considered for SDS right now? And failing that, can you confirm if the Minister is going to reply to my original letter of December 2nd or not?
Madam Chair, thank you for this question and the intervention provided. So I'm happy to report that Bangladesh is indeed being considered in the SDS program. So on March 24, 2022, IRCC informed the High Commissioner for Bangladesh in a letter that the internal evaluation of SDS was completed in fall 2021, and the department is reviewing the results of that evaluation. The SDS program, as you all know, is a program that helps expedite processing. And so IRCC remains open to continue to finishing that evaluation and to be able to hopefully see Bangladesh become one of our SDS streams.
Thank you. And if you could please provide us a written response about when that is likely to be completed, that would be very helpful. And Madam Chair, I'd like to give the rest of my time over to Monsieur Deltel.
Madame Chair, bonjour à vous tous. Ma question est pour Madame.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have a question for Ms. Xavier, and it has to do with immigration from certain countries. You talked about consultants, and I quote, you said that there might have been issues with some of them. Do you have trust in their integrity? Answer, well, it's clear that we always hope that consultants who work in this area do so with the right intentions. And there are consultants who do all possible, who work with the best intents. But there are people called ghost consultants who work throughout the world. And they are a worry to us from the point of view of integrity. And this is why we now have a consultants college, which we established through legislation. Question. So those who act on behalf of the Canadian government according to Canadian rules, they have a certificate from this college. Is that correct? Yes, that is my understanding. According to your understanding? Yes, to the best of my understanding. I'd like to know if consultants who have been certified by Canada, have they been certified by Canada? Well, I'm not familiar enough to tell you about this system of certification. I can get back to you with the facts. That's why I'm hesitating. Thank you very much. I appreciate your honesty. I think this is something we need to look at. I think the trust has to be a two-way street. If you have a college, consultants college, we have to be able to detect any perhaps bad actors in the system. Well, Madam Chair, I can assure you that the college does exist, but I'm not totally familiar with the present state of the college, but it does exist. And I imagine that among its objectives, the objectives of the college, one is certification, but I can get back to you on that. Thank you, Madam. Your integrity honors you.
Thank you. We will now proceed to Mr. Dhaliwal. Mr. Dhaliwal, you will have 5 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please begin. Mr. Dhaliwal, you're on mute. No, we can't hear you. Maybe your speaker is not...
How about now?
Yes, we can hear you now. You can please begin.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, in the past, this committee has heard about difficulties with family class applications. The Immigration and Refugees Act requires the spouses going through a sponsorship process to prove, number one, that their marriage is genuine, and number two, when they entered into the marriage, their intentions were to be husband and wife, not to be a marriage of convenience. And where the decisions are made, I see a lot of decisions that are made are very, very difficult to grasp the reasons that they are failed based on. I would like to ask a question to you, to the department. What are some of the factors used to assess this legitimacy of a spousal relationship, and how often they see that the spousal sponsorship applications are refused due to concern with the genuineness of the relationship?
Thank you very much for the question. We see so much value in family unification because we recognize how important it is to bring families together, and it is an important part of the programs we deliver. So when we're assessing the relationship between spouses or common law partners, officers must be satisfied that the relationship that exists is genuine. The application kit requires that applicants submit certain documents as proof of the relationship. And in the case of applicants in spouse or common law partnership in Canada class, officers must be satisfied that the applicant is living with the sponsor in Canada. If the documents submitted do not provide adequate proof of a genuine conjugal relationship, and that could include things like pictures, just demonstrating that the relationship has been ongoing for some time or that it is legitimate. And if the officers have doubt that the application is living with the sponsor, or the officer may request additional information or schedule an interview to get clarification on the application.
Madam Chair, I'm not satisfied with this answer because particularly I look at India and Pakistan. Many marriages still nowadays are arranged marriages, and it's not necessarily they fell in love with before they start the marriage, and most of those applications are failed because it is the age difference. I mean, in love and relationship, age is just a number, and why applications like those? And then economic status can be anything once you fell in love with those, and those are the issues. And I want to see how department will work in future to mitigate those reasons that the spousal applications are failed and are been harassed for so long.
Madam Chair, if I may, I believe Madam Lang will be able to provide some additional information because as stated, it is important that we ensure that the relationship is genuine, and we're not doing so in a manner that is, seemed as harassing of an applicant. So, Madam Lang.
I'm sorry, can you hear me? Sure, my apologies. So in general, family class applications have a very high approval rate. And so I'm sorry to hear that you have a number of instances of what you believe are, disingenuous refusals. We do request a lot of documents, and if we are not satisfied as the officers making the decision, if the department's not satisfied, they can be convoked to an interview to try to establish genuineness of relationship. But rest assured that as part of our anti-racism efforts, if there are things that we are not seeing from a cultural bias perspective, we hope to uncover that in our evaluation of programs and policies, and absolutely would like to do better if there is a way to do so.
Madam Chair, on the TRB application, it's almost been over a year and a half or 2 years people are waiting, and the decisions are not made, and particularly from the Delhi office. I would like to see what department is doing to improve the situation, and particularly in that office.
Thank you very much for the question. I will say that with regards to during the pandemic, we did make decisions to address the priority applications of people who could travel towards Canada. And at one particular point, as you know, the border restrictions were not permitting us to be able to allow all applicants to head towards Canada. Having said that, Madame Lang has some additional information with regards to your question.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. As part of the fall economic statement, the department was given several $1 million in order to work on processing times and backlogs, and a significant portion of this money is being dedicated to reducing the TRV backlog, and particularly as it pertains to files coming out of India, as we know is our #1 source country at this time for temporary resident visas, and we do have hundreds of thousands of applications that are dedicated
Sorry for interrupting, Ms. Lang.
processing
Time
those.
is up for Mr. Dhaliwal. This ends our panel. Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'll be very quick. When Mr. Redikoff raised the issue around the clerk's report, the law clerk's report to be brought back to us, I would like to actually ask for this information to be included in that report, and that is for the law clerk to do a legal analysis on the issue around client solicitor privilege, so that the committee will have that information, because I think pertaining to the undertaking to be released deals with that issue. The other thing that I would also like to receive incorporated in that report is how has it been dealt with in terms of that question of client solicitor privilege by committee previously? I don't recall it actually becoming an issue at the committee for the time that I've been here. So I would like to actually know the historical background of how often has this matter become an issue for the committee and how it was dealt with. I think sort of getting some information with respect to that would be useful and helpful for our committee's work.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan.
Thanks.
Is adjourned now?
Yes, Mr. Gano, quickly, because we have a hard stop, like we have to adjourn the meeting. We don't have services available after this point.
Just quickly, I agree. I just maybe want to clarify that what we're looking for specifically is for the law clerk to provide advice as to whether solicitor-client privilege is a legitimate reason for excluding documents, or whether the right of parliamentarians to access documents, in the view of the law clerk, is not subject to that limitation. So I think, in particular, that clarification from the law clerk, as well as some of the historical background and context that Ms. Kwan has suggested. So I'm supportive of the recommendation.
We will have to adjourn this meeting because we don't have services available beyond. I will discuss it with the clerk and get back to the members in our next meeting on this issue. So, and just to remind, before we adjourn the meeting, just a reminder for all the members that we have the extra meeting tomorrow from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. So I hope everyone will be able to join in. Do I have the consent to adjourn the meeting? Okay, the meeting is adjourned.